Good afternoon, and welcome to the Cyberbullying webinar. My name is Brandy Brooks, and aside from being the moderator this afternoon, I am a contract manager for the Massachusetts Department of Public Health Suicide Prevention Program, the sponsors of this webinar. Before I introduce our presenter, Dr. Elizabeth Englander, I would like to go over a few housekeeping issues. First, should anyone experience any technical difficulties with either the audio or video for this webinar, please dial 1-800-843-9166. Again, that's 1-800-843-9166, and a Ready Talk representative will be more than happy to help. Second, all telephone lines are muted except mine and Elizabeth's. So please use the chat function to type in any questions you may have. Given the number of participants, Elizabeth will do her very best to answer as many questions as possible as we go along and at the end of the webinar during the question and answer period. Now that I've gotten that out of the way, let me introduce our presenter, Dr. Elizabeth Englander. Dr. Elizabeth Englander has a Ph.D. in clinical psychology. She is also the founder and director of the Massachusetts Aggression Reduction Center at Bridgewater State University, where she is also a professor of psychology. Dr. Englander is the author of 3 editions of Understanding Violence and dozens of other articles and book chapters, as well as serving as the guest editor for Special Edition Cyberbullying from the Journal of Social Sciences. Through her work, she has presented on topics including bullying, cyberbullying, aggression and violence, social success, and success online. So without further ado, I will now turn it over to Elizabeth.
Thank you. Please stand by.
Yes, hello. Can everybody hear me? Or I should ask, actually, Brandy, if you can hear me. I'm not sure this is going through.
I can hear you perfectly, Elizabeth.
Okay, sounds good. Good afternoon, everybody. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through the presentation, and it would probably work best because of the number of participants if you go ahead and send any questions you have by chat, but it would probably work better to hold off on answering the questions until the end, just because that way we can make sure to get through everything, and then I can really turn my attention to the chat box. So, if that's a problem, by all means, you can yell through your capital letters, but generally speaking, if we can hold off till the end, that's a great idea. Okay, for those of you who don't know what MARC is, I just thought I would very briefly tell you about it. This is a center at Bridgewater State University in the public higher education system here in Massachusetts. And what we do in the center is we conduct research on bullying and cyberbullying. We do programs for K-12 education in schools. And we also do other activities. So, for example, we run contests statewide. We develop curricula, things like that. The basis of the program is that the center utilizes faculty and students, graduate students and undergraduates, to bring programming to K-12 education. And so we do that through a series of different programs, most of which we do in school at no cost to schools. And that's a great part of the whole idea. Also, however, the research that we do is, I think, very important and really helps the program significantly. And through our basis at the university, we have access to older teenagers for research purposes. We also do research on kids in grades 3 through 12, and on parents and on faculty. So we have a number of different sort of avenues that we're constantly exploring. The purpose of the program at the university level is to train future professionals. So we have students that we are training to go out into K-12 education, and that's a model that works really, really well. Mostly what the kids in the center focus on is they focus on the programs that we use to educate kids in K-12. So in essence, the older kids are teaching the younger kids, and that is a very important part of it. and very helpful part of it as it happens, because really if adults go out and speak to kids, they can be very powerful, there's no doubt about it. But there's something especially powerful about having a sort of a high-status older peer, even, somebody who's even just 5 years older than you or a few years older. I'm just noticing on the chat that a number of people or a few people are asking about sound. Is there some kind of sound issue that's happening right now? Can people hear me? If people can hear me, okay. Sounds like most people can hear me. I am on a cell phone, and if I need to, I can move to a landline. So please let me know, anybody, if there's problems like that. All right, the purpose of the programs that we do in schools is to really not to treat. We don't do treatment. We don't do referrals. We do no clinical work of any kind. We don't refer people to therapists or to lawyers, nothing like that. The purpose of the program is really around prevention, and so that's based on decades of research in which we really, it's really been very well established that the way to address and prevent online and in-person bullying in schools is to establish a school climate where the kids and the adults are very conscious and very aware about bullying, where they're thinking about it, and they are really engaging their peers to stop this kind of behavior, to see it as something that's really socially undesirable. That's what we call the whole school approach. And in essence, it's a very important part of the approach, but it's difficult too. And preventing bullying is not an instantaneous or overnight process. It's really something that has to be done sort of one brick at a time. We try very hard to be innovative in the program. We try to be very practical. We try to be very concrete. And we definitely use our research directly in the field. And that's actually a big advantage that we have, because many academic centers do research but they don't do field work, or they do field work, there may be clinics that do field work but they don't do research. And it's very advantageous, frankly, to be doing both, because it really gives us an opportunity to address things that we need to know in our research and to apply those directly in the program. For those of you who may or may not know about this, this year we're releasing a number of curricula. There's a K-5 curriculum on our website on bullying and cyberbullying. There is a high school curriculum, which we're in the middle of field testing right now. As soon as we have data on that, we will release it. We are going to have a day at the college, March 15th, which is going to be reserved just for training adults on the cyber issues in the cyber skills curriculum. The curriculum for high schoolers is not really about cyberbullying per se. It's about digital skills that contribute to safety and bullying online. So we're going to have this training day because I know that many adults feel uncertain about their knowledge basis in this area. And so that's really what we are going to be addressing in it, the knowledge base. And for those of you who want to do that, you might want to keep that in mind. Okay, the research that we do, as I mentioned very briefly before, is on grades 3 through 12. So we have surveys of thousands and thousands of kids in those grades. We also do research on parents and on faculty, but probably our most fruitful research program is the one that we do on freshmen in college. And what we do is we sort of grab the freshmen when they come in, and we study them in great detail about what their high school and middle school experiences were like, a little bit about elementary school too. But it's really advantageous for the high school issue because, frankly, in the high school issue, when they come as freshmen to college, high school is a very recent memory, and they still really remember what was going on. And so we study them about things like their social interactions and their peer interactions and conflicts and bullying. We talk about, we study them for their relationships with teachers and parents. And that kind of study, we do a lot in that study on digital behaviors. And that's been extremely helpful in helping us understand better what's going on, although there are still, as you'll see as I go through this, many, many questions that we haven't answered. The high-status peer model is, I've referred to what that is, I think. That's just a model that we use to deal with teenagers mostly. But here is, we also do programs outside of K through 12 education because, frankly, K through 12 education really cannot do this alone. And it's really important that we utilize all of the resources in the community. So one of the resources that I think is underutilized is pediatricians. Parents go to see pediatricians every year. Pediatricians can educate both kids and parents around these issues. And pediatricians carry a lot of weight, generally speaking. And so parents who may have a more difficult time in their relationship with their school may listen to their pediatrician more readily. So we're working very hard to try to get pediatricians educated and on board with this. And we're having some success. We actually are doing a pilot program at Boston Children's right now. Okay, so I'm just going to tell you very briefly about the research that we're doing and the research I'm going to cite in the study. The one I'm going to cite in the study today is the study on college freshmen, and it's over 600 in the study so far. Some of the findings are very established. Some are rather preliminary, depending on where we're at with the analysis. But that just sort of gives you an idea of what we're going to be doing. Okay. Oops. Sorry, I skipped one. Okay, this is, I apologize, a little bit out of order. It's not point number 6. I wanted to start by talking about cyberbullying and how much it has changed life in school and the social lives of children today incredibly much. And I really think you almost can't overestimate the impact of this on kids' social behavior, on their socialization, on how they develop friendships, on many, many different things, which I'll talk briefly about. Basically, we see cyberbullying cases down to grade 2. That's probably because you have to be literate to cyberbully. So you can't do it in grade K or 1 for the most part. You're usually not good enough at reading and writing. We have a tendency to think of kids today as very knowledgeable about computers, but actually they are very comfortable with them. They are not particularly knowledgeable about them. That's an important distinction to make. I just want to make a sidebar for a minute. I can see somebody asked if they can get copies of the slides. Generally speaking, what I ask presenters to do, and I think I spoke about this with Brandy, but I'm not sure. I'm happy to give out the content of these slides. That's not a problem, but I usually ask that people not utilize the slides themselves just because that's caused so many problems for me in the past that I don't even want to get into it. And people are always very well-meaning, but sometimes they misinterpret events or misinterpret information in a perfectly well-meaning way, and I'm always the one who ends up getting in trouble. So rather than field a lot of irate phone calls about this, what I can do is send everybody who's here today an outline of all of the content of the slides, and then once you really feel like you're comfortable with the content, you can build slides around it. I'm perfectly happy to give you the content. It's not a problem. Okay, anyway, so kids, generally speaking, are very comfortable with technology, but they're not particularly knowledgeable. One of the things that we did in the study this year is we asked kids to tell us, to estimate for us how much they thought they knew about information technology. And then we also gave them sort of a test where we actually tested them on their knowledge base to see how much they actually knew. And they did pretty poorly on the test as a whole. Now remember, these are college freshmen, so these are not, certainly at Bridgewater State University, they are not going to be the most competitive group, but any group of college freshmen is in general among the more competitive sector or segment, I should say, among kids. So really, they weren't all that knowledgeable. They were comfortable, but not all that knowledgeable. But here's a couple things that can demonstrate just how comfortable kids are with technology. and they are very, very comfortable with it. This is a study that was done in San Diego at the University of California about a year ago, 2 years ago now. And basically what they did is they were trying to show how America consumes information. And just as an example, if you look at the blue sectors, you can see that from 1960 to 1980, the television consumption went up significantly, and then it dropped down again by 2008. That probably won't surprise any of you who are parents, because you know that it's not that kids are doing less screens, it's that they're doing less television. And as you can see, by 2008, 27% of their consumption was online. And that's very, very different. And actually more than 27% when you count games online. The point is, though, that this is obviously something they're very, very comfortable with. Kids are very comfortable as well, and that can be seen through their use of something called cloud computing. Cloud computing is basically when you use a program that is based on the Internet instead of a program that's installed on your computer. So just as an example, if you want to make a document, if you were to use Microsoft Word to create your document, that's a program that's installed on your computer. But you don't actually have to install any program on your computer. You could go through your browser to something like Google Docs, and you could create a document there. And that's a full word processor. It's just that it's online. Now, kids are comfortable with cloud computing by and large because they can't really envision a world where, where there isn't an Internet connection. Of course, we can. We can remember when Internet connections were sketchier or not as readily available. But most kids today pretty much assume that they're always going to be able to get online. This is a study that was done, pretty funny one, I think, that was done in Europe among older teenagers. And basically what they said to them was, if you had to give up your Internet connection or your partner, which one would you give up? And most of them said they would give up their partner rather than their Internet connection. And I really just show this to sort of demonstrate how far it is that kids would go, how much it means to them to be connected electronically. And I'm actually going to talk more about this as we go on, but that's just to give you an idea. Another issue that's very important has to do with the disconnection between kids and their parents. There is a very broad and significant digital disconnect, and this contributes to bullying because it's one of the major feeders to bullying in school and online is online interactions. And that's another point I'm going to make later that adults often don't realize, is that these kids don't see the distinction between digital behavior and in-school behavior the way adults do. They see the two things as just part and parcel of one interaction. So I thought I'd talk about some of the disconnect between parents and kids. Okay, where are the parents? I think one of the first things that we noticed is that parents do tend to have this belief set that if they have a nice child, they couldn't possibly engage in bullying, particularly in cyberbullying. Of course, one of the advantages of cyberbullying is that it often leaves a written trail. And so you can pretty readily, see exactly what the child has done. I've myself have gotten many emails from parents who are absolutely devastated to find out that what they've been told about their children is true, that they were bullying others simply because they had the black and white evidence. What kids tell us about this business about being nice is that many kids today seem to feel that what they do, particularly what they do online, but also to some extent, I think, what they do in school, really doesn't have any reflection on how good or successful a person they are. They think that being a successful person is sort of about being on top socially, and that's true to some extent, but they don't see bullying as being related to these issues. Another issue that's very big is the idea that parents really think that the objects we call cell phones are telephones. So they look at an object like this and they think that they're giving their child a phone, and that's what they're giving them. But my argument is that really that's a phone. That other object, this object, is not really a phone. for those of you who are younger in the audience, I should explain that when we were kids, you had one of these objects in your house, and it was tethered to the wall. You couldn't walk around with it, and it weighed about 11 pounds. People actually used to use these as murder weapons. I used to see them when I was a student in my research. Okay, so what is this other object? Is it really a cell phone? Well, one of the things that we did was we asked the kids, what percentage of the time do you actually use this device to make voice conversations? And that's where you're talking and there's somebody talking on the other line, on the other side, excuse me, of the line. And as you can see from this pie chart, the vast majority of kids are not using it as a phone. 75% of the kids said that 30% of the time or less, they are not using this device as a telephone. They are using it as a mobile device, a mobile computer, which is really exactly what it is. So is this a phone? I don't think so. I think that this is a mobile computer, and I think that we really need to ensure that we as adults are all aware of this. Now, there's nothing wrong with giving a child a mobile computer as long as you understand that that's what you're giving them. And I think that part of the problem is the semantics. I think we call it a phone, and so we think of it as a phone, but it's really not a phone. Okay, another interesting issue that I've come up to me is the whole fantasy that being a good parent means being best friend with your kids, and you know, that your kids will never, ever, ever lie to you, and that's what being a good parent means. This is a survey that was done by Quiblo. It's not a MARC survey, and it was done on 15 and 16-year-olds, and basically what they did is they asked them if they had ever lied to their parents, and as you can see, the vast majority of them, 90%, said yes, they had. So if you're a good parent, does it mean your children will never lie to you? No. What kids tell us is it's not a big deal to lie about the small stuff. Now, what they call the small stuff and what we call the small stuff may differ. I think that's really the point of divergence. But kids don't see it as a big deal as long as it's not about something quote-unquote important. Okay. Other issues. Parents have a hard time understanding why kids can't put the device down, why they have to have it sort of tethered to their body at all times and have to constantly be around this. And this was originally thought of as sort of like an addiction, but I think that as researchers went along in the field, it became clear to us that it didn't really resemble an addiction like alcohol addiction or substance abuse addiction. In ways it does, but the kids talked to us a great deal about anxiety, and this was very interesting. So the first year we asked kids how they would feel if they couldn't use their device. More than half of them said that they would feel very anxious or pressured. Now, we have more detailed data on this this year, which I don't have on this presentation, but just as an example, one of the things that we found was that girls were much more likely to talk about feeling anxious and pressured. They're very accustomed to living in a social society where there is constant, if there's not constant communication between them and their peers, there's a constant potential for communication. So it makes them feel very anxious when that potential is cut off. They worry that they're going to miss something. Something important is going to happen socially, and they're going to miss it. Okay, parents tell us, generally speaking, that they monitor what kids do online, but kids tell us that they don't monitor. Their parents don't monitor them. One of the things we looked at in our research was the percentage of kids who told us that their parents let them use the internet in high school with absolutely no restriction of any kind. And you can see here that the divide between the kids and the parents is enormous, that 55% of the kids told us they had no real restrictions, nothing at all. Now, I think that probably, I'm going to guess here, that the source of this semantics, this difference is, again, semantics. That when you ask parents if they let their children use the internet with no restrictions, or you ask them if they monitor their children when they use the internet, parents are thinking of the desktop in the kitchen. That's the device they're thinking of. They're not considering the fact that they've given their child a mobile device that can go on the internet with no supervision at all. And I think that's probably the source of that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about semantics. I apologize again, the numbers got out of order. I'm not sure how that happened. But anyway, one of the most important semantic issues, I think, apart from calling a cell phone a phone as opposed to calling it a mobile device, is that we talk about privacy online with kids. And we talk about to them that it's important for them to be private on social networking. We talk about how social networking has risks and that there are ways that they can be more private and increase their privacy online. And I think that that kind of approach is a big mistake because there really is no privacy on social networking sites. Kids, generally speaking, have hundreds of friends. Actually, in our research, about 45% of them had 300 or more friends on their profiles. So they have hundreds and hundreds of friends. And, there's nothing that's open to hundreds and hundreds of people is private, not in the way that you and I might use that term. So I think it's really, a mistake to keep calling things private. I think that the message for social networking has to be, you can somewhat restrict who sees your information initially, but you can't restrict who they pass it on to. And if there's hundreds of people on your social networking profile, just one of them can pass it on to many other people. It's sort of like the message we give them about photos in general. You can control who you send it to, but you can't control who they send it to. Okay. Some statistics about cyberbullying in Massachusetts. One of the ways we measure how common bullying and cyberbullying is through a couple of different ways. One way is through just asking kids, have you ever been a victim of bullying? Have you ever been a victim of cyberbullying? And as you can see, about half of them report to us that they're victims. A few more girls, about 56%. But the other way that you can study this issue is you can study it by asking kids, by sort of giving kids a laundry list of the most common problems that happen. So you say to them, for example, has anybody ever made up a lie about you online or revealed something about you that you didn't want revealed? And if you ask those kinds of questions, you get, generally speaking, higher percentages. Now, these are the numbers we got last year. And the only problem with this is that the problem with counting things this way is that you really don't know how minor or how major these issues are. So you don't get a feeling for how significant they are. It may be that 80% of girls had some kind of problem online. It sounds like they did. But what percentage of that is fighting? What percentage of that is just a one-time sort of problem with somebody, which is really different from bullying? What percentage of the things that are bullying really impacted them emotionally? Maybe they are reporting an incident, for example, that that annoyed them but didn't really traumatize them in any way. So one of the things we need to do to begin understanding these behaviors better is teasing all that apart. And that is actually exactly what we're doing with the data this year that we're in the middle of analyzing right now, but unfortunately I don't have it ready yet. All right, when we look at types of cyberbullying, I think that the take-home message about this particular slide is really that the rumor mill is the ruler. The rumor mill is the thing that is by far the most significant. And it's just incredibly pervasive and incredibly important. And I think that rumors are such a huge part of this issue that if all we really did was develop programs around rumors, then we could probably go pretty far in prevention with this. One of the issues that we also asked kids who told us they were cyberbullies was we asked them to talk to us about why they chose to bully others online. Why didn't they do it in person? And the number one reason was that they liked not having to see the victim. That made them more comfortable. It made them bolder. And this syncs very well with other data we have about how kids really feel that or not just kids, really, it's kids and adults, that they really feel when they're online that they can say things that they would feel inhibited from saying when they're face-to-face. And that's a very important thing to understand about online interaction. it doesn't make it hopeless. I think that people have to just be conscious of this tendency in themselves. Kids have to think about this fact when they're talking online. They have to consider whether what they're saying is really smart, because from an emotional point of view, they feel able to just say things that they would definitely not say otherwise. The other thing that we ask them, apart from the more general motives, is we ask the kids to talk to us about what they were thinking or feeling right at the moment when they actually did the cyberbullying. Like, what was their immediate rationale for doing it? And among the boys were fairly simple. The boys were generally about looking cool, making a joke to look cool, to look funny, things like that. The girls were a little more complex, and they were much more often than the boys about issues around anger, which I'm going to talk a lot more about later, because the girls and the anger issue is definitely a specific issue. So what I want to do is look at a few specific cyber challenges here. The first challenge is that these behaviors start young. They are not issues that emerge in middle school. These are issues that begin very young. And indeed, in our study of third graders, 95% of the third graders we studied in Massachusetts were playing a game online, at least every now and then. So all the third graders pretty much are online. And that is, that's a very important point to remember. Sometimes teachers get confused. I had a teacher who emailed me once and said, oh, my third graders aren't online, they just all play Club Penguin, which she didn't realize, I guess, is an online game. What they're doing, by and large, is they're playing games online. Okay, let's see what else. The next thing I have, this is a screenshot from Club Penguin, which I am not knocking. Club Penguin is very reputable, and they really do a pretty good job. But there can be bullying on any type of game, and this is the most common thing that you tend to see, and it's this kind of remark that tends to happen the most often. This is a case where 5th and 6th grade girls put together a cartoon on Windows Movie Maker, and the cartoon was about a couple of different ways that they could kill one of their classmates, who was a little girl named Piper. And this sounds really horrible, but I'm actually not showing it to you because I'm not trying to argue that kids are sort of little sociopaths. What I'm trying to show you is that they really didn't understand why the adults were so upset about it. They pointed out correctly that they didn't bully Piper in school, and Piper agreed that they didn't bully her. That didn't seem to be the case. And that this was a cartoon. It was just being funny. It was kidding around. And they didn't understand why the adults were so upset by it. And I think that's very characteristic of children today. They're not taught anything about how electronic communications impact other people and how important they are. And so they sort of tend to assume that they don't matter because nobody ever talks about them with them. Just so you know, these kinds of findings are some of the issues that we address in the K-5 curriculum. We start with cyber issues in kindergarten in that curriculum with just letter identification and vocabulary building. And some of the issues that we're trying to address in the K-5 population are things like the myths around bullying and cyberbullying, the overuse of the terms around it, the lack of attention, generally speaking, to friendships and how they develop, and peer support. That's the bystander business. Anybody in Massachusetts can request the K-5 curriculum for their school, and we give it away for free. So you just have to request it on our website. Okay, if you're not from Massachusetts, I should point out you can still request it, but we just have to talk to you about it. We sometimes have to charge out-of-state schools a small fee just for our expenses. Okay, a couple other things. These things, online issues really affect kids throughout the school day. Probably the biggest issue, and this is the one that I I said, oh, will the adolescent one be free? Yeah, we're testing the adolescent one right now, and it will be free for all schools in Massachusetts. Yes, absolutely. When it's been tested, it will be. It'll be the same as the K through 5. You'll just request it through the website, and we'll send it to you. Okay, so this is the issue that we see a great deal, and we've addressed this both in the research and in the field where we see it, and it has to do with the escalation of very minor problems that probably before electronics would have been nothing, would have been nothing. Cynthia, you have a question? Do you want to type it into the chat? I'll keep talking while Cynthia's typing. One of the issues we see around this escalation is that kids have a tendency, and this is particularly true for girls, as you'll see, I'll show you the data in a minute, to do what we call vent electronically. And basically what that means is that when they get upset or annoyed or angry at their friends, what they tend to do is they tend to begin texting their friends and their other friends and saying, oh, can you believe so-and-so did this, and I'm so annoyed with her, and they're sort of venting their frustration electronically, and their friends tend to be nice about it and say to them, oh, I understand how you feel, stuff like that. You can see from this chart, this is data from this year, that the venting is twice as common among girls, and that by the way, was borne out in the research in a couple of different ways. Another issue is that we did in the study was we were trying to figure out how online and in-school interactions sort of coexist with each other and how they interact with each other. So we did a path analysis. We were trying to get kids to talk to us about how it is that these problems happen, both conflicts and bullying online and in school. And basically what the kids told us is that about 70% of the time these issues start in school, and then they're sort of exacerbated online after school in that evening, and then they go back to school the next day. The whole thing has escalated. That's often the day 2, when the school adults seem to detect these issues. They may or may not detect them, but if they do, that seems to be the day they do it. And what they do is they often will try to work with the kids, and try to get them to address the issue, and maybe they do. And then the kids go online again because no one has talked to them about what is the impact of going electronic right after, when you guys are upset with each other. Like, what's the impact of that? Kids today don't understand how that escalates the problem. They think it's actually a way to resolve the problem. And they don't really understand that it tends in the long run to have the opposite effect. And so they go back online and they undo all the work that the school adults did with them that day. Very frustrating for the school adults. We also know that, particularly in girls, there's a relationship between being a girl online and between being a bully online and a bully in school. This is just preliminary data, but we need to study it a little more. But clearly there is a relationship between those two behaviors. Okay, so what types and issues are we seeing? Well, that takes us to the third challenge, which is the things that we're not really very comfortable talking about. We don't really like talking about with kids, and we don't really get them anyway. We don't really understand them ourselves, and that makes it very challenging to address them with kids. Probably Exhibit A on this is sexting, and sexting is a really interesting phenomenon because it's one of those phenomenon where there is very widespread misinformation around it. Kids tend to believe and reinforce myths around it that adults wouldn't even have known about really unless you do research. And the exhibit, the way to show this is to point out that when you ask kids why they sex, the number one reason they all give, you're sitting there in a group with them or any way you ask them, they say attracting people is the number one reason. But then when you study the kids who actually have sexted, and you ask them why they sexted, other issues come up. So curiosity is one of those issues. But the most disturbing one that comes up is bullying or coercion or pressure. And this actually is the most common reason. When you study the kids who have actually sexted, the most common reason they give you is not attracting somebody. It's because they felt pressured or bullied into doing it. And that is very, very disturbing. And that means that it's a different kind of behavior that we're seeing. Now, this chart shows the boys versus the girls in the rationale. And you can see, amazingly, the boys were even more likely than the girls to characterize their sexting episode as having been pressured or coerced. Now, when we asked the kids who was it that actually pressured or coerced you, the girls, it was mostly somebody they were dating who wanted the photo, and they felt that they had to do it in order to keep the relationship. That's very disturbing. But also the boys were kind of the boys kind of fell into two different groups. One group were the ones who felt that their friends were pressuring them, and it was kind of like, well, they're doing it, so they want me to do it too. But the other ones were ones who just felt like they were more directly threatened. They were tricked or bullied, or they felt like they really had no choice, and that one is even more disturbing. All right, other kinds of problems online that we're seeing that are very common. A significant trend that has popped up very recently is sort of mass befriending. I've seen this mostly at the middle school level, and what happens is a group of kids get together and they decide they're all going to unfriend one person online that night. So the poor kid, whoever the target is, gets 30, 40, 50 kids unfriending them all one night, and it's very devastating. Applications and games in general on Facebook, we're seeing a lot of heat off of these. We used to really see the problems primarily in kids posting things or making comments, and we still do, but the applications and the games have become a serious issue. This is one you might see on cell phones. I think it's only on iPhones right now. It's called the Ugly Meter app, and basically what you do is you take somebody's picture, and then the Ugly Meter supposedly scans the picture and gives you an ugliness score. And it's not real. It's a fake score. You can scan a chair and get the same score as scanning a supermodel. It's not a real score, but they do use it to sort of put each other down. Then you see applications on Facebook like Sorority Life, and these are applications where the kids have rivals and burn lists, and there's a couple of burn book pages, which are like slam books used to be on paper, but of course they're much more broad, and those are problematic. Hold on, I just got a message, a problem on my cell phone. I'm wondering, Brandy, can I call back on the landline? Is that going to be okay?
Sure. Is that the other number you have, the 508?
No, it's the 781 number. Here, I'll type it to you right now.
Okay. All right. So
I apologize, everybody.
Everyone listening on, stay on. Elizabeth has to hang up and dial in using another number, and she'll be back momentarily, and we'll pick up where we left off.
Hello?
Hello, Elizabeth. You're back.
Okay, my apologies, everyone. Hopefully that was a quick break. Everybody could run for a glass of water. Okay, so anyway, one of the points I want to make about these kinds of applications is that you can't you can't be sort of targeted in an application like this, even by kids who think that they're just kidding around, and then go to school the next day and feel normal about seeing everybody. It really has a big impact on you. The other thing is about groups that I think is important to point out is that who you put on your friends list actually matters a great deal, even though kids don't think about that, generally speaking. And the reason that it matters a great deal is that your friends have power over you that many people don't realize. So just as an example, your friends can join you to a group, any group, without your permission. And there's no way to turn that setting off. So it's very, very troubling, and kids really have to be conscious of that. Another issue we see a lot of is FormSpring and Honesty Box. We see more Honesty Box at the middle school level, more FormSpring at the high school level. And what's basically what these programs are is, these are applications that a person places a box on their profile or their page, and they invite people to type anything they want into the box anonymously. And that really sounds kind of crazy, and it sounds like you're inviting abuse, which really you are. But kids feel extremely pressured to do it. They feel like their friends are doing it and they have to participate. They're very unaware of the power they hold as the consumer, and that's, I think, really important. Is Facebook going downhill? It's not going downhill, but it might be going downhill for teenagers. If you look, 90% of the users now are over 17. They're 18 years or older. So that's really a very significant number, and it's growing fastest among the older folks. One possible, there's several different kinds of other programs. This is just one of them. It's called Buzz. It's basically Google's answer to Facebook. It has not really caught on as Facebook has caught on, but there are other applications that are similar to this. So for example, myOL.net is one of them. Diaspora we're seeing some action on, but nothing has really caught on fire. We're sort of still looking for that. All right, then we also see problems with video technology, and typically this has to do with kids not understanding limits on picture taking and video taking. One of the things that we do talk about in the high school curriculum is we talk about the fact that in Massachusetts, you can't actually just whip out your cell phone and start recording a video recording of anybody you want, because the audio portion of that recording is against the law in Massachusetts. You have to have the subject's permission in Massachusetts to make an audio recording of them, but many kids have never heard of this law. They have no idea it exists. So that's just an example of one of the issues we address. All right, then we see particular issues with girls, and this is an area of great concern to me. Boys have more of a tendency than girls to gravitate towards social networking sites. Girls have more of a tendency to gravitate to social networking sites. Boys are more interested in gaming sites. So they're on their Xbox or their PS3 and they're playing games. And that's really one of the things that they enjoy doing primarily online. And the gaming sites are very, very different from social networking sites. Gaming sites are much, much more structured. And the kids certainly do they do use sort of abusive language, but it's in quite a different context there. One of the differences that we see between boys and girls is who they target. I talked earlier about their motives, but I think one of the most interesting things we found last year is that the boys had a tendency to target other boys who were not in their circle of best friends. They would target boys they might see around at school or boys who were strangers to them. Girls, however, had a tendency to target girls who were among their closest friends at one point or another. And that's very disturbing because that's really, really a big difference. One of the ways that you see this difference played out is in how kids attribute what's happening to them. One of the things we did was we took the kids who told us they were victims and we said, why do you think the cyberbully did this to you? What was their motive? And the boys said, well, they were trying to be funny. They were trying to look cool. They were trying to up their social status. They were trying to win the game, and that was the motive in sort of talking. One of the boys in a focus group said to me, it's like trash talking on an athletic field. You know, you don't take it so personally. It's like the boy would trash talk anybody they were playing against. But the girls saw it clearly as somebody trying to be mean to them. And that syncs really well with the girls' perception of who it is that they're attacking. So if you're attacking somebody who was a close friend of yours until very recently, then it makes sense that that would be interpreted as a particularly cruel or mean thing. Okay, so why do we have to care about these issues? We certainly all have a lot to do. I think it's important to understand that electronic communications is an absolutely critical skill. It's a critical skill in the 21st century, and these kids are not being taught it. And so I'm very disturbed about that. I also, and the private profile thing is just a good example of how they're not being taught these things. Sophos did a study, a very interesting study on kids building up. Well, just so I make the segue correctly, you may remember I talked about how kids think that these profiles are private, but they have hundreds of people on their friends list, and so they really don't. Sophos did a study about kids wanting to put people on their friends list, and so they created these two fake persons. And they used sort of ridiculous names and pictures so that they could never be mistaken for a real person. And then they sent out 100 random friend requests to kids, and 50% of the kids accepted the friend request, no questions asked, right away. And of those who accepted the friend's request, they had all of this information that was completely open to the person who they did it. So they're very motivated to do that. Another reason that we have to care about these issues is all the problems we see, not just in targets and not just in bullies, but also in bystanders. Kids who see these problems have serious issues. And I think it's really important to point this out. One of the interesting things that has come out recently that I think is really, really helpful is what can adults do that actually helps. And Stan Davis and Sharice Nixon did this research on 13,000 kids across the U.S. And basically what they found out is what hurts, what helps, things like that. And you know, this is a list of the things that kids said were really helpful. So don't ever ignore problems when you see them. Respond to even what we call gateway behaviors, which are the very sort of minor, rude, mocking, insolent kind of behaviors that kids do with each other. And listen when kids are hurting. That was a big part of what the kids talked about in that study, that they felt like adults were often sort of charging off to make a report or to involve the police or to call the parents or to start filling out forms. And really what they wanted the adults to do was to sit and listen to them. And that was a really important part of it. What about what you can hit with the kids? Let's talk about a few key points that you can hit with the kids, and then I'll be quiet and you can all ask questions. The first principle really is that everything that you do counts. And everything online counts. It counts when it's in school. It counts when it's online. This is how people are going to judge you. And kids have this tendency to believe that some things just don't count. They also have this tendency to believe that they're invisible, particularly online, that they're just completely invisible. They're one of 3 billion kids, and nobody's ever going to see what they're doing. And that is definitely a myth. Another point that we find very useful to make with kids is what we call the 24-hour rule. And the 24-hour rule is when you're irritated or angry at your friends, don't go online for 24 hours. Don't start texting people and posting things. Just don't do any of that for 24 hours. Wait until everything has cooled down and see if you can't just resolve this without going electronic. We also talk to kids about understanding that when they put things online, it's permanent. It's sort of written evidence. And I think kids have heard this a lot by now, but we give them examples of these pictures. These are like pictures you might think are funny at the moment or cool at the moment, but they're really not so cool pretty soon afterwards. Okay, I'll just wrap up by telling you that there's a lot of free materials at our website, and you can download them in PDF form. As long as please don't send emails asking for everything printed out. We don't do that, but they are all available for free download, and you can point parents to them or use them yourself. And that is our website and our email. So now would be a great time. If any of you have questions, please feel free to type them now. I will be happy to send to anybody the content of this presentation. I don't, as I said earlier, I don't give out slides because it always gets me in trouble, but I am more than happy to give you the content. So if you have questions, please go ahead and type them now. What's the definition of a bully? I'm going to take these one at a time. You know, there is no hardcore definition, but generally speaking, when you're talking about something is bullying, you're talking about behaviors that are repeated, that are intentional, not by accident, not one time, and where there is a power imbalance between the kids. So those are sort of the three criteria you want to look at. You know, in a conflict or a fighting situation, you don't necessarily see a power imbalance. And if kids are just being mean one time, you don't see a repetition. In a bullying situation, you're looking for a situation where there's an ongoing relationship between these kids that is abusive. And so it's not a one-time event, and it's not an accident. Let's see what else we got here. What's a good resource for creating policy for social networking? And oh boy, this is a great question. I don't know if everybody can see this. What's a good resource for creating policy for social networking and web use for youth development workers and teachers? I don't know of any great resource. Generally speaking, you need to do this, however, and you need to think about, for example, do you want teachers and students connecting on very open and unfiltered sites such as Facebook. And generally speaking, my feeling is that, that educational use of social networking is better confined to more appropriate kinds of sites than Facebook, which is really not designed for educational use. So my advice when people ask me, should teachers friend students, I always say, no, you shouldn't friend them, because even if you imagine that they will never see anything on your profile, if another student, let's say that you had a profile set up just for you and your students and there was nothing personal on it ever, you know, you could have a student, a different student leave something objectionable that other students will then see. You have no control. So I think that's a bad idea. Can I talk about how to counsel the person who bullies? I can't actually talk about that because I'm not a counselor. I'm not a clinician. So I think that that is a question that I'm going to defer to somebody else who is a clinician. What is the best way to receive the content? Who do we send an email address to? You can certainly send it to me at the email address that's up on the screen right now at mark@bridgew.edu, and I can send you the content. I'm happy to do that. Can you identify what you consider gateway behaviors? Yes, gateway behaviors are behaviors that don't break a rule, but they set the tone for a community or a school. So an example of a gateway behavior would be kids who roll their eyes when somebody gets a question wrong in class, or getting other kids to laugh at one kid in the hallway, or staring pointedly at somebody you're trying to intimidate. Those are gateway behaviors, and they are not against any rules. There's no rules against looking at kids or laughing. You couldn't have rules like that. The problem is that, generally speaking, oftentimes adults don't really respond to gateway behaviors. They're not sure how to respond, and they're not sure if it's their role to respond. And when we train teachers and staff, we really emphasize that It's extremely important when you see gateway behaviors to tell children how disturbed you are by seeing mocking and insolent behaviors, that it's really not okay, that you as an adult in that setting do not want to see them, that they're rude and they're inappropriate. There's never a reason where it's okay to roll your eyes at somebody. That's just never, ever okay. And so I think that's one of the most important things that we sometimes miss. Here is a question about, can you talk about school policies related to the use of electronic devices at after-school events? Generally speaking, well, okay, the issue really here is, when does a school have jurisdiction to punish a cyberbully? And you know, in most states that I'm aware of, if the device, the cell phone or mobile device, is used on school grounds, at a school event or during school hours, you have that jurisdiction. But I really think that the important response to this question is to talk about what schools can do apart from disciplining a cyberbully. Because even when these instances occur, even if they feel they have no jurisdiction over the actual cyberbully themselves, they still can have a lot of impact on the event. Remember that there's a victim here who's been traumatized, and schools can definitely help kids who are going through traumas, and they should go through. Also, the kids who are involved in the online behavior, it may be that you can't punish them, but you could certainly talk to them about their behavior and warn them about any retaliation or repetition of the behavior in school. Remember that by our research here in Massachusetts, what we find is that it's unlikely that actually when something's happening online that there's nothing going on at school. The odds are that if it's happening online, there is something going on at school too. And so that is the place then it gives you really the room and the place to intervene. What are the best practices as far as online boundaries with youth? Sarah, I'm not sure I understand what that question is. Could you retype it again? Online boundaries? I'm not sure. Boundaries about what? Boundaries between kids and practitioners? Boundaries between kids and teachers? I'm not sure exactly what you mean, so if you could answer that. Next question, what do you think about the Eyes on Bullying program? You know, I have to tell everybody a confession, and that is that I am now at the age in my life where I have very little short-term memory left. So even though I know I've read the Eyes on Bullying program, I don't remember offhand what it does. I could tell you that most reputable programs are based on the same principles, which is the whole school principle, training kids around the social appropriateness of things and bystander intervention, things like that. I will say that one point where I think programs fall down is I think they don't emphasize gateway behaviors enough. I think most of them talk to kids about the more extreme kinds of bullying that we know from our data doesn't really happen that often. So it's well and good to say to kids you should intervene if somebody stuffs another kid in a locker, but what we really need to start doing is saying, how do you feel about seeing the other kids at your school doing things like rolling their eyes at each other? How does that feel? How does that make you feel seeing it? How does it make the kid who's the target feel? And really talking about that. What preventative measures for bullying do you find most effective in the classroom? I think the most preventative measures are to have a very concrete rules and standards and to be very clear and consistent about how you respond to things. So I think you need to respond to gateway behaviors and to more obvious bullying behaviors. And I think that there have to be very clear rules about what the repercussions are. And I prefer Stan Davis's model where you have the rules in writing and you say to the kids, okay, if you do this, then you're going to go to the principal's office. If you roll your eyes the first time, I'm going to give you a warning because it bothers and offends me. And if you do it twice, you're going to get a second warning. And if I see it a third time, you are going to the principal's office for breaking a class rule. That kind of thing, very clear cut kinds of repercussions. There's a question here about what have I done with school systems in regard to the new Massachusetts laws on bullying. Well, we've done tons and tons and tons. You know, we've basically been living and breathing this new law for about 2 years now. And we have trained administrators. We have, and we are continuing to train faculty and staff. We do programs with students. We do programs with parents. We also, I worked very hard with the state senate and and the legislature here in Massachusetts around the content of the law. So that was a big part of our work on it. Okay, is there any truth to the comments that the UK television has different ratings with regard to what's transmitted on the Internet? I actually don't know the question to that. Not being a person in the UK, I don't know. Next question, are GLBT-related issues often the focus of the cyberbullying content? GLBT issues and related issues are often the focus of both bullying and cyberbullying, particularly at the high school level. They are really one of our biggest challenges, and kids will tell us that bullying others around, particularly kids who they perceive as gay and lesbian, or around perceived gay and lesbian behaviors, or just bullying them by calling them gay or lesbian is one of the most preferred ways to bully people. And they often feel that the adults are not interested and do not intervene and simply are going to allow this. The kids see it as a safe way to bully people because they see it as something the adults don't enforce and won't respond to. So yes, that is most definitely a big issue. And what I'm not clear is that the bullying of gay and lesbian kids is substantially different. Apart from the specific content, the method and the motives, I'm not clear that it's particularly different, but I don't really know that. But I can tell you that they are one of the leading issues that kids tell us they bully others on. Other leading issues are issues like looks and who is sexual behaviors, and of course, as I just said, sexual orientation. Okay, I think I have come to the end. Okay. Somebody pointed out that No Name Calling Week is this week. That's right, and it'd be interesting to see how successful something like that is. One of the problems is that this has become, I think, such an incredibly pervasive issue for kids that we tend to do sort of these one-strike interventions, but not to follow them up. And I think that it has become so ever-present among children that really the only way to address it is to go after it very, very persistently and really keep it on the burner. And that's very challenging to do with all of the other things that we have to do. So Brandy, I think we've come to the end of our questions.
Okay, well, if no one has any more questions.
Oh wait, here's one. Do we have pervasive use? My feeling is that the way to address those kinds of remarks is to tell children that you personally find it very offensive and you don't want to hear it. And the comeback to that is usually something like, we mean it differently, we don't mean it that way, and it's not a problem for us. And when children say that to me, what I say to them is, it doesn't matter how you mean it. What it matters is how it's perceived by the people who hear it. So, it's really, really important for kids to understand that. And so I never let them get away with that argument. And I always say to them, you may think you mean no harm by using that terminology, but I'm telling you I'm harmed by it, and I don't want to hear it, and it's inappropriate. You can't force them to do things with their peers when you're not around, but what you can do is teach them very deliberately that these are sort of the these are the social norms that you expect, and that's how you train children in the social norms that they should be thinking about. And so that's what I meant when I said at the beginning, this is like a brick by brick process. It's nothing very, very quick. And thank you, Ellen. Ellen typed a very nice thing. Thank you, Ellen. We will certainly continue our work. Does anybody else have any questions? One great strategy that's been successful is you use the student's name. Oh, I see. Yeah, I understand that. Although, I guess what I think is the most important thing is children absorb their values from the adults around them. And so I want to be very clear and very concrete with kids and say to them, I don't really care what your rationale is. There's a certain point at which I sort of tend to lose my touchy-feeliness, with children, and just say to them, this is wrong, bottom line. You may agree or not agree, but I think you're going to agree when you're older. And I'm telling you now this is wrong, and I don't want to hear it. It's kind of riding between two areas. Here's a question. Suggestions for getting parents more involved. That's really the million-dollar question. And I would actually lob that bomb right back at Brandy, because my feeling is that the only way that we are really going to get across to the number of parents we need to is we need to run a public health campaign. And I think the public health campaigns around texting and driving or things like that have been successful. And that's the kind of campaign that we really need in order to get the word out. We certainly work with parents all the time in MARC. Every single week I go out, and every single week I send out, I would say, 2 to 3 presenters out to parent and community groups. But having said that, we can really only reach so many parents. And so we really need something that's going to be more widespread. I think public health is the way to go. I don't know if Brandy has any thoughts about that.
I would absolutely second that. We are always working, because we represent the entire Commonwealth, we are always working to get parents, teachers, educators, psychiatrists, sociologists, nurses, doctors, pediatricians, everyone involved in this, because it is a public health issue.
Absolutely. The other thing, Brandy just reminded me, is that pediatricians, I think, can be a good way to get through to parents. They're there, and every year they go to the pediatrician's office, and they're right there. And so that's one of the reasons that we're doing the project at Boston Children's Hospital, trying to see if we can really get more pediatricians to embrace this issue and discuss it. Well, thank you all so much for coming and for listening. I hope it was useful.
And I'd just like to second that. If there are no more questions, we'll go ahead and end the webinar now. I would like to thank Dr. Elizabeth Englander for presenting and you all for participating. As Elizabeth stated earlier, she's happy to send the content of this webinar to participants. I'll also be emailing you all and including a link to the podcast for this webinar. In addition, be on the lookout for any emails about upcoming webinars and trainings being sponsored by DPH. After you log out, please take a few moments to complete the evaluation. I hope today that you've gained more knowledge about the impact of cyberbullying among youth and some ways to counteract this. Again, thank you all for participating, and have a wonderful day.
And thank you, Brandy, for setting it up.
No problem, Elizabeth.
Thanks to everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Please stand by.